So I'm sure that my mom is the only mom who ever said this to their kid. Well, if you really love me, you'll do what I tell you. I think it had to do with taking out the garbage. But I always think Mom said a lot of other nicer things to me, but I remember this one. Whenever I read this gospel, because I think that we need to remind ourselves that if we're talking about relationship, that we're born in a relationship, we need to be in a relationship with Christ, and that there's some expectations there. And sometimes Christians get into this way of thinking that they think, well, if I'm just a nice person and I have nice thoughts, that I'm going to be a good Christian, and that has nothing to do with it. In fact, you don't even find the word nice in the Bible. And so today in the scripture readings, both the second reading and today's gospel talk to us about love. And it's a very, very important teaching. I want to remind you today, because I try to remember this myself a lot too, Jesus was extremely radical. Unfortunately, over the centuries, we have tamed down the gospel message and kind of turned Jesus into a pet. We've domesticated him. Nice doggy. We've taken the teeth out of his teaching. But in his day, that message was really radical, and if we're paying attention to it today, it's really radical. And let me give you the context of this morning's gospel. So Jesus was speaking to the Orthodox Jews. And remember that the Orthodox Jews, not bad people, but their way of following God is by following the letter of the law exactly. And you think, well, that's not such a bad deal. But a good Orthodox Jew, even today, will be following over 600 laws. You think you got it bad with 10 commandments. We get off easy. Over 600 laws. So, for example, I had an aunt who got a job being a cook for a Jewish family in Peoria. And I don't know how much you know about Orthodox Judaism, but in the home, there was one side of the kitchen that had refrigerator, freezer, sink, stove, dishes, knives, all that stuff, and that was the kosher side of the kitchen. It was duplicated on the other side. There was another sink, another stove, another refrigerator, another freezer, another set of dishes, another set of silverware. And so the kosher food needed to be served from this side of the kitchen and prepared, and the other food that was not kosher was done by this. Well, you can tell what probably could happen. So my aunt was cooking for a big dinner party that they had, and the meat, which had to be kosher, was prepared on this side. She happened to grab a knife from this side of the kitchen. Cut the meat. Grandpa came in, who was a rabbi, and threw the whole damn works out. Okay? Now, it's not our job to make decisions about that. But remember, Jesus was always helping them to understand that it is not the rules that are going to save you. It's about the relationship. They have a lot of other ones, like a lot of you women would love this because they keep the Sabbath strictly. So it means you don't cook. Everything's prepared the day before. In fact, a good Orthodox Jew today doesn't even run a microwave. You just take it out of the fridge and set it out. That's how strict they are about following the laws. So these are the people that Jesus is talking to, and now he tells them that the most important law is love. And they must have thought, are you nuts? Are you out of your ever-living Jewish mind? And so he doesn't not only say that it's about love, but then he gives us an example and an explanation of what he's talking about. So he has loved one another as I have loved you. So he always gives them this example. And then he goes on to say, he starts to use the word friends. The word friend is not used in the Bible very often. And he says, I don't call you slaves because a slave doesn't know what his master is about. Now again, in that society, there was a very strong caste system. And so there were the Levites, the Levitical class of priests, and it kind of all came down the hill, and you didn't ever marry or talk to or associate with people who weren't in your class, okay? So equality in relationships was not a concept that was in their minds. And so Jesus said, I don't call you slaves. Slaves don't know what's going on. I call you friends because I've told you everything that I know. And so he uses that also as one of these ideas of love. And then he says, a friend lays down one's life for the other. And so that is how he's helping us to understand what this kind of love means. Now, you folks understand that. If you've been married more than 10 minutes, you understand what it means to lay down your life for somebody else. As I've said before, there's some times that you wake up and look at your spouse and you say, oh my God. And other days you wake up your spouse and you say, oh my God. You know what I mean? Okay? You know what that's like. If you've raised kids, you know what that's like. It's a life of sacrifice. It doesn't mean that you have to get murdered. Sometimes you might feel like murdering somebody. That's a different homily. But this is the life that we're called to. That's the kind of radical love that we're called to. And we have so many excuses nowadays. We say, well, it's not my business. I can't get involved in them. Or they have to make their own decisions. I can't do anything about that. And so we know that there's stuff going on in other people's lives, and we wring our hands and we don't get ourselves involved in them, but we're not listening to what the gospel message is. The last thing is the last line of today's gospel. Jesus, as you heard read in the introduction from Mass today, Jesus didn't say, it'd be nice if you'd think about this, or you might try this. He said, this I command you. Now, Jesus didn't use that word hardly at all. This I command you, love one another. As I've said during Lent many times, following rules are a lot easier than loving. A lot easier to love. I didn't eat meat on Friday. But I was an absolutely obstreperous person to get around with during the week. But because I didn't eat meat, it made it okay. Not. Jesus' greatest transformation that he brought to the world was this new law, not all these other laws, but the new law, and that law was the law of love. And it was not optional. So we like to kind of choose who we love, huh? But remember, Jesus never said, like one another as I have liked you, because none of us are ever going to like everybody. Ain't going to work. Sometimes you don't like the person you're married to. But he didn't say that. He said, love one another, not like one another. So that's why Christians should be different. That's why we should have less divisions. We should have less times that we're crossing our fingers behind our backs about certain groups of people or certain situations that we don't want to get involved with because we have our own judgments about them. Jesus said, I'm not interested in your judgments. And so the thing that haunts me sometimes is what Judgment Day will be like. Because that judgment happens not about if you kept all the laws. I really think it's going to be the times that Christ is going to show us our failure to love. And as I like to imagine in our technology age, that we'll get set on a little chair and there'll be a big flat screen TV that'll drop down, and Jesus will just kind of go through some slides of situations where we failed to love. So he might show you your mother-in-law. Or your boss. Or the kid that drives you crazy. Or somebody who wronged you 29 years ago and you're still holding them accountable for it. That's what this is going to be. It's not going to be if you made the 9 First Fridays. It's our relationships with each other, huh? So that's why we keep emphasizing this idea about we are called to live in community, we're called to be in relationship, and our job as Christians is to try to keep that relationship as strong as possible. So as we continue to celebrate this Easter season, I think it's a great thing that this gospel happens close to the end of the Easter season, because it reminds us about what the fundamentals are, what the most important thing is. He said, like my mom, you're my friends if I do what I tell you. If you love me, do what I ask you to do. And the last line makes it pretty clear. This I command you. Love one another. It's not easy. but it's our call.